Hey guys, so I went to a charity sale today and did some thrift shopping with my best friend, and I just wanted to show you some of the beautiful things that I picked up. Again, just for a few dollars a piece. I love this painting. I think it's just stunning. Anything that has a ship on it or is like a scene of a harbor or the ocean, I'm just drawn to. And so I couldn't resist picking this one up, but I actually think it's gonna go to school. We just bought a beautiful new fireplace for our student lounge in our upper school, and I need to make like a wall collage of prints and paintings above that for the students to enjoy. So I'm thinking this one will be part of that. I found this Walter Isaacson biography of Benjamin Franklin, which I've actually been meaning to get now for months because, if you recall, I read his Leonardo da Vinci biography and absolutely loved it and made a video on that. And Benjamin Franklin is another one of those multi-talented Renaissance men, geniuses, similar to Da Vinci, and so I've been wanting to read his biography. So happy to have this. And then I also found a stack of beautiful old Penguin classics. Again, these are my favorite. I just adore these old Penguin editions. I do have most of these already, so I'm debating whether or not I'm going to keep them or whether I'm going to bring them to, again, the upper school student lounge for the kids to enjoy as non-curricular reading. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing because I already have Tessa the D'Urberville, Jane Eyre, and Jude the Obscure. I don't think I have A Portrait of the Lady by Henry James, though. I've never read any Henry James. So if you've read this one and you recommend it, let me know. This is a box of things that it's going to school. Another really nice painting, which I don't want to pull out because it's going to mess up all the things that I have down here, but it's another really beautiful landscape for above the fireplace in the student lounge. Then I got these little brass little brass cups, pot sets. And then everything else that's wrapped up in newspaper here are like vintage themed or Christmassy teacups and mugs. Really classy, nice looking ones, nothing too tacky, that I'm gonna turn into candles with the grade 8 girls to be sold at our school's Christmas market fundraiser. So that's on the agenda for this week, is to figure out how to make candles out of old little things here. One final thing to show you guys. The leader of my women's writing circle found this and gave it to me, and I'm so happy because it was made in England. It's got this beautiful little ship here and ye old jug inn, which I love. And then a little saying here on the back. When this you see, remember me, and bear me in your mind. Let all the world say what they will, speak of me as you find. Just think it's very, very pretty. The countdown is on in terms of my final master's course essay deadlines, so I'm gonna do some work on a Charlemagne essay that I'm writing for one of my courses. I did submit my pre-proposal this week, which is very exciting. It's a very basic proposal, just outlining sort of my title, my research question, my topic that I'm interested in exploring, and then also highlighting my top supervisor choices. So admin is going to sort of look at all of these and figure out which supervisors we're all going to have. So I'm very excited for that next step, to actually get a supervisor to start chatting with about my dissertation. So it's going to be good. This is actually so horrifying. It's not even Remembrance Day yet. Hey you guys, as you can tell, we've been hit by like a freak snowstorm. We don't usually have snow this early, and the fall has been lingering. So many of the trees still have their leaves on them. Like, I'm staring at two bright yellow trees right now, and yet there's literally this much snow on the ground and on top of basically everything. So total freak snowstorm, and I have to say I'm not really here for it, and I was not ready for it. I'm so not a winter person, which is unfortunate because living in Canada, we do have long and pretty intense winters. And I love the fall, so I'm sad to see it go. But apparently all the snow is gonna hopefully melt by the end of the week. And so then we might have a few more weeks of fall after that. And then hopefully a white Christmas. But we're still a ways away from Christmas. So if it could just stay nice and orange and yellow and brown, I will be very happy. Anyways, I just wanted to say a few words about Marilynne Robinson because I read 2 of her novels this past week and a few of her essays. I devoured Gilead and then I devoured Jack after that. So if you're not familiar with Marilynne Robinson, she's an American novelist and essayist. She's still alive. She's in her 80s, so she's a contemporary author. One of the few contemporary authors that I've read and come to really respect. Some of her most well-known novels are Housekeeping, which was published in 1980, Gilead, 2004, Home, 2008, Lila, 2014, and then Jack in 2020. And then she also has a number of nonfiction essay collections. So The Death of Adam, Essays on Modern Thought, which was published in 1998. When I Was a Child, I Read Books, 2012. The Givenness of Things, 2015, which I haven't read, but it's been on my list for a long time. And anyways, most of her writing has to do with faith and American life and American history and science and sort of the intersection of all of these things. Rowan Williams described her as one of the world's most compelling English-speaking novelists. And here's a few quotes from her that I think are really cool. She said, "I think if people actually read Calvin, meaning John Calvin, the reformer, rather than read Max Weber, he would be rebranded. He is a very respectable thinker." And so interestingly, John Calvin and his writings and theology pop up a lot in her fiction and in her nonfiction, which I've really enjoyed. Here's a quote from her essay titled Freedom of Thought, which was in her collection When I Was a Child, I Read Books. She says, "There is a great difference in fiction and in life between knowing someone and knowing about someone. When a writer knows about his character, he is writing for plot. When he knows his character, he is writing to explore, to feel reality on a set of nerves somehow not quite his own." And this is something that Marilynne Robinson herself is brilliant at. She does this brilliantly with Reverend John Ames in Gilead, and she does it brilliantly with John Ames Boaton in Jack. And so I want to talk about these 2 books because they are related. Gilead was published first. Jack was published actually 16 years after Gilead, but it's set before Gilead. So same characters, same world, but it's part of the history of a character that comes before the story that's told in Gilead. And so Gilead, it's an agonizingly hopeful story. It's essentially the letter of an aged father, the dying preacher John Ames, to his 7-year-old son, and it's full of reflections on life, death, faith, and family. It's the thoughts and prayers of a humble man who's in love with life, despite the hardship of it. He's a man who knows he's about to exchange his humble life for a better one, but who acknowledges that he's going to miss the broken world and those that he leaves behind anyhow. Gilead is very much a story of fathers and sons. The Reverend John Ames reflects on his father, who was a pacifist preacher, and on his grandfather, who was a fiery abolitionist preacher. 2 very different men. And so there's a complicated family history there of preaching, but also of disagreement about a Christian's role in war, essentially. And John Ames's letter also reveals his struggle to trust, love, and accept his wayward godson, John Ames Boaton, who is not his son, but is named after him. I'm not going to tell you exactly why he was named after him. I think you need to read it. And so the question that I was sort of left with after reading Gilead is, what is the relationship, the connection really, between this faithful preacher man, old man dying, full of faith, full of hope, and then his godless namesake? Because at first glance, they are so different. And yet, in some ways, they are also the same person. And so then Jack, the novel Jack, which was published in 2020, is the history of this wayward godson, John Ames Jack Boaton, who is a self-proclaimed reprobate. If you don't know what reprobate means, it's a theological term that essentially refers to someone who is not saved and will not be saved. Calvin's distinction between the elect, those whom God has chosen to be his people, and the reprobate, those who are not God's people. And this is essentially the story of the prodigal son. So Jack Jack Boatman has no love for life. He's entirely given up on life. He's basically a dead man living until something really extraordinary happens to him, and this is sort of the thing that brings him back to life and almost puts him on the path towards redemption and faith and hope and love again. So Jack is the story of a bum, a thief, an idler, a drunk, who confronts the possibility of meaning after having given up on the possibility that life could be meaningful so long ago. He learns love and loyalty, the two things that his dear father offered him and still offers him, right? He's the wayward son, and the father is just waiting to welcome him back and give him these things, but he's rejected them time and time again. It's also a very complex love story. It's a story of race and color in segregated America. It's also about the faith, the love, and the hope, and the resilience that transcends racial and denominational categories. And I think Marilynne Robinson is exploring in both of these books the questions: what really is the heart of Christianity? Who is a Christian? What does it mean to be a Christian, to follow Christ? How is that expressed in our actions, in the way that we treat others, in the way that we forgive and love others? How are we to live in doubt? What if we do have doubts? What if, some of the theological questions and seeming problems and tensions we just can't reconcile and have a hard time accepting, living with? What then? How do we find faith? What is faith? What does it mean to have faith? Does it find us? Does it chase us? Or is it something that we have to go after? And how does that work between generations, right? When you can have generations of faithful believers and then all of a sudden a wayward, son or daughter who's just not able to believe in the things that their fathers did. How do we deal with that? Jack is a much darker story, a darker novel than Gilead, I would say. The lines of hope and grace are less clear. There were so many times where I felt myself just so frustrated with Jack and just pitying him because he really is a lost soul. And yet, despite that, I somehow still have this feeling that Gilead, the story of this faithful minister preparing to pass into the next life and reflecting on the life of faith that he's led, all the ways that God has worked in his life and all the things that God has done, somehow that story is the same story as Jack's story. Somehow, I just have a sense that this is true, and it's something that I really need to think about and reflect on more. Overall, what I love about Marilynne Robinson's work is that I just think it's brilliant that her works sort of live in the tension between faith and doubt, between hope and despair. And her work declares that there is truth and goodness and beauty despite of that. And there's this theme there, I think, that, in God's eyes, in reality, there is no tension. But because we can't see what he sees and know what he knows, we think there is, and we live in that. But we have to trust that all is clear on God's side and that all will be made clear to us when we join him on that side. So I just love that Marilynne Robinson asks the really hard questions of religion and of life and is okay with the answer sometimes being unclear or difficult or hard to accept, because that's the reality of it. And perhaps the answers and the truth are lived and not told. And perhaps that's why these things are best explored through story. Perhaps the answers and the truth are things that are experienced and thus known and believed, and not necessarily things that can be given to someone else, because one has to live through them oneself to really know the truth of them, right? Just speaking of religious experience there. And so if you haven't read any of Marilynne Robinson, I highly recommend that you do. Next, I want to read Housekeeping because it's her most famous work, and it's about the ordinary American woman and mother and the extraordinary life that she actually leads. And so that's on my list. Also, the snow is melting, so that's a good thing. And we're back. And just like that, the world is orange again. Good morning, guys. I just spent a few hours working on my Charlemagne essay and I got my first draft finished and I think it's in pretty good shape. There are a number of things that I should go back to and expand on, give a bit more detail, etc. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it, and at least I've got, the base structure of the essay ready to go, my bibliography done, my appendix. I'm feeling pretty good about that. My goal was to get it done by the end of the week, and it's only Wednesday because next week I'm actually going to be marking a bunch of university essays for the prof that I used to work for, and I still work for, clearly, from time to time, just occasionally. So I'll have that added to my workload of teaching and my own homework, all this essay grading, but I'm looking forward to it. It's actually quite a pleasure I really enjoy editing and marking, grading. It's a pleasure to me. So I'm happy to tackle this group of essays, but yeah, it'll take up a lot of my time. Next week, I can't remember if I showed you all the Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe book that I ordered in the other day. I actually ordered it in for a student. So in one of my literature classes, students have to do an independent book study, you could say, reading project where they have to read a book that's not part of our curriculum, but that is relevant to our curriculum, a book that we're not reading in class together, and then they need to teach the class about it. And one of my students wanted to do The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, and the book was absolutely beautiful. I'll put a picture of the cover up. It's just so pretty. Let me know if you've read The Mysteries of Udolpho or anything else by Anne Radcliffe and what you think of her writing. Okay, I'm about to head to school for the day. Most of the afternoon and evening will be spent in parent-teacher conferences, which I have very mixed feelings about as a teacher. Because yeah, sometimes some of the conversations can be challenging and I don't find that very fun or enjoyable, but it's an absolutely necessary part of what we do. My school is very big on parent-teacher partnership, and we're in this together. We're looking out for the good of the child, of the student, and so that collaboration and that discussion is a really necessary component, and so I think it'll be good. It's always just a little anxiety-inducing going in, but it always turns out so much better than I think it will, and the conversations are productive and helpful. One final thing before I end this video. On my last video, I mentioned that I would like to do a Q&A video sometime, and I did get a number of interesting questions just posted in the comments on that video, but I'm happy to answer a few more. So if you have any other questions for me just about my life, my work, my reading, you can ask pretty personal questions. I won't promise that I'll answer them necessarily, but I might. I'm not opposed to getting personal as long as I'm able to communicate myself well in response. So feel free to do that. Comment down below on this video, and then hopefully I'll make a Q&A video in the next number of weeks. And so yeah, I think that is all for this video. So thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like. That really helps me out. And I think there's also like a new function where you can promote or shout out a video too. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you did that because it just helps me out a lot as a creator. Comment your questions down below, and I will see you again very soon.